You're listening to the Occupational Philosophers with Simon Banks and John Rice.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Occupational Philosophers, where each and every week we join you with a not-so-serious business podcast that mashes up the worlds of creativity, some curiosity, and a defty, spicy dash of philosophy thrown in. As always, I'm joined by my co-host and co-producer, John Rice, over in the UK. John, good evening to you and good morning as well.
Thank you, Simon. I hope you're doing well there. I just thought I'd lead into this little Inbetweener episode with my reflections around a conversation we had with Julian Baggini, the British philosopher, a few episodes back, which was really fascinating. You might recall, do you recall this one?
Yeah, and I quote Julian all the time in some of the work that I do, actually. His notion of putting in speed bumps I speak about. And also, which I think we'll cover today, pay attention. But I like how we dived into his book, How to Think Like a Philosopher, which gave you some tools and techniques. And I guess that might be where we're going today.
It is. I mean, I just started to wonder a bit more about those and thought they were a fantastic template to consider what it means to be an occupational philosopher. So how might we think like an occupational philosopher? And I wanted to explore just how we might bring those into the workplace in maybe some of the common forums we might meet as employees, executives, team members in meetings, etc., and things like that. So I thought that might be fun to dive into.
So my guess is we might look at a few questioning assumptions, seeking out evidence, maybe looking at biases as well, would you say?
Yeah, that's it. And going beyond that, exploring how philosophical thinking helps us navigate uncertainty and make better decisions, maybe even find greater meaning in our work.
Well, John, this sounds exciting because, as always, I like embracing a little bit of my inner philosopher. But I believe we've got 13 principles to guide us. Would that be correct?
We have. It's a lot to digest, but don't worry. We're going to break it down and make it practical and keep each point kind of short and punchy and succinct and hopefully be something useful by way of a takeaway for people.
Now, we're telegraphing a lot of intent here, so my hope is that that's exactly where we're going to land. So look, let's do it. Let's dive in. Number one, fire away, John.
Yeah, well, we're going to start with the basics, and it ties into that first chapter within Julian's book, which is pay attention. And he kept returning to that as a theme, but it really underpins everything, I think.
So I'm thinking in a more modern world, emails, pings, someone humming next door in the cubicle or next hot desking next to you. It's go, yeah, those type of things. Yeah.
Yes. Well, yes, there is paying attention to what's important and not getting too distracted. Yeah. But yeah, it's about being present. It's paying attention to the world around you, paying attention to what others think, listening, engaging with others, truly listening. You know, that's crucial for understanding and building relationships and ultimately for yourselves to come together in a business and make good decisions.
Now, this is a good point because we've all been in a meeting or we've all been in maybe a workshop and someone's sitting there with their laptop open. So I guess it sends a signal that I'm not in the room. I'm not paying attention. So I'm thinking you might even put the laptop down, make a bit of eye contact.
Yes, this is all very revolutionary, isn't it? But it does work. And it's not, you're right, it's not just about listening to words. People need to pay attention to, with their whole selves, and need to pay attention to each other as a whole self. So that's body language, tone of voice, the whole picture.
So I'm thinking like when your boss says, hey, everything's fine, but their eyes twitching. And you can't quite take your own eye off it. Yeah.
That's a red flag right there. Yes. Yeah.
All right. I like this. I like this, John. And I also very much in the world of innovation as well. When we talk around testing your ideas with users, your body language and that whole of person gives you as much detail as what might actually come out of their mouth.
This is right. The one other thing about the paying attention as well is that idea that, and again, Julian touches on this, attention can be hijacked. And I just think this is a nice one to conclude on this particular point, which is you've heard about confirmation bias and probably heard about things like change blindness. And they're kind of variations on a theme where either we pay attention to stuff that confirms what we already believe.
Yeah.
So that's one way we can get hijacked. Or we oblivious to things because we weren't expecting for that to come into discussion or into play. And there's that great video, which I know you've seen and we've both seen, which is the basketball playing team. And they say, hey, we want you to pay attention to how many passes have been made. And as you do that, you fail to recognize that a gorilla, or certainly a gentleman dressed in a gorilla's outfit, just kind of sidles across the screen in full view from one side to the other. And over 50% of people then, when they're asked, hey, did you see the gorilla? They go, what gorilla?
I've read it's even higher than that. In my mind, it was like, I've read similar things. It's like 80 to 90%. And often I've read another one, I'm sure we've spoken about it, when someone will turn around, like, let's say they're booking a hotel, they turn and look over their shoulder, the entrance, and the I don't know, like the person checking them in, whatever you might call that, concierge,
yeah.
They disappear and the person doesn't know. Have you?
Yeah. If we can find some of these, we'll put some of the links in I think the show notes, but they are just absolutely fascinating to watch. Anyway, so there's number one, pay attention.
Okay, what's next?
Well, what's next, Simon, is question everything.
Feels a bit rebellious, John. Feels a little bit anarchist.
Well, we have said this before, that questioning is at the heart of it. It's curiosity leads to these questions, it is rebellious, but not if you do it right. I think it's about asking thoughtful questions that dig deeper, challenge assumptions in the spirit of a genuine desire to find the truth. And if you do it like that, then it can take you to the right place. So any thoughts as to what might be a question that maybe is not genuine and is perhaps loaded or leading? So loaded or leading questions, you might say, they often have built-in assumptions in them. So something like, hey, should we set the deadline for this Friday, or shall I start getting my excuses in now? So,
okay, all right.
The assumption being that we are going to fail as a team to deliver on this particular project or deadline or whatever. So that's a simple example. So what we're trying to do is get into a habit of good questions that are about the things that are important, that are in a genuine desire to find the truth, and are not loaded or leading. They cast aside any assumptions and make sure they're not built into those.
Okay, John, principle number 3, ask, does it follow? Tell me, I'm not sure if I've got my head around this correctly.
Well, this is, it's drawn out from Julian's thing, which is to ask, does it follow, or what follows, is just a useful thing when somebody maybe presents an idea or an argument or whatever, to be able to follow it through to some conclusion. So they argue for something. You say, okay, what would follow as a consequence of us doing that thing that you've suggested? And so you can start to tease out contradictions, inconsistencies, assumptions again. We talked about questioning can tease out assumptions. So again, it's the idea of just allowing you to analyze and follow an argument and check that that idea takes you to the right place, for example, and that any conclusion that person's arriving at makes sense.
So let's say, as an example, I'm just riffing here, Dave from marketing got a revolutionary ad campaign, hyper excited about, calmly dissect his logic, something along the lines of, Dave, does it follow that a dancing llama and a crazy clown will boost sales for our, boost sales for our new widget? Correct?
Widget.
Yeah.
Yes, we'd say, okay, what would follow from that, Dave?
Okay.
What would follow from the dancing llama on TikTok? Well, it'll get a lot of likes, but it might alienate our 55-year-old plus demographic base.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that's it.
But follow along with, does it follow? That's the way it might come out. As in, so what Mr.
What
Baggini
follows is
saying.
just a nice way for you to gently probe an argument idea. So I like that one.
Speaking of following, John, principle number 4, follow the facts.
Follow the facts. So this is about not just relying on gut feelings or hunches. They can be useful, but they shouldn't be the only factor. So this is kind of looking at the data, the research, the evidence, and trying to avoid availability bias, which
Yep.
is, again, we talked about confirmation bias, and availability bias where you maybe only reach for the most recent data.
Yeah, sure.
See your daughter using social media and see something about avocados on TikTok and think that everyone's interested in avocados without sort of researching your market more fully, for example. So it's about sort of going beyond what's immediately accessible to you.
So it's a bit like you.
And it's another bias.
Okay, a bit like you getting super excited about, hey, I've just discovered ChatGPT. And I said, well, you're 2 years too late. So,
Everyone's using ChatGPT. Yeah, whatever, John.
Old school.
Just a note on that. What's interesting about this is, of course, philosophical thinking is about sort of countering, I think, in a really good way, all of these biases. We'll talk about it further on, but, biases effectively are shortcuts to deeper thinking, really. Sometimes Daniel Kahneman talked about it in terms of system one thinking, system two thinking. System one thinking was where those biases have something of a benefit to play, but they are shortcuts. And so it's trying to sort of make sure we don't sort of fall too readily into using those shortcuts when we're trying to do some deep thinking about sort of core business issues. Now,
the flip side is I heard a discussion this week around some leaders can't look past data. So that's all they've got. They don't lead. Everything is based on every decision they make is around the data. So there's no story, there's no engagement, there's no inspiration, all of those things. So I heard the flip side of that this week.
Yeah, and you can get, you don't want a paralysis by analysis type thing, but it is just sort of making sure you cast your net further, as it were, to get the data that might be relevant. And just because you can't get it immediately, don't dismiss that you don't need it.
Okay, so follow the facts, John. That makes sense. What's next?
Next up, Simon, is mind your language.
So you mean...
so this is...
not calling someone a mule or something in meeting or swearing or along those lines?
Not just about swearing in meetings, but it's about using clear, precise language, avoiding jargon, corporate buzzwords. I know that you have a particular soft spot for some corporate buzzwords and jargon that we've picked apart before. Ambiguity of language. You need to understand what words mean and get a definition of terms.
So I am going to say goodbye to synergizing our core competencies, leveraging our strategic assets, picking off the low-hanging fruit, and I'll circle back to you on that one. So some of our faves.
Yes.
Check previous episode.
Basic. Yes, that's it. Just dispense with that. You just need to say what you mean in plain English, I think. And we know that misunderstanding and misunderstanding is absolutely rife in a lot of the communication that we would see in teams and organizations. So, there's a really nice one as well, which is that Julian picks up on, which is if you are using a word in a conversation like strategic or, like strategy or whatever, you say, what role does this word need to play? So you say, well, it could mean this, it could mean that, it could mean the other. What are we going to say the word means in the context of this conversation and our discussion? And I think that's a really nice way to cut through to then being able to have a clearer discussion. Yeah.
And I think it even goes to, with your language, some people say, ethics, morals. Well, in our sense, what is ethics? What is morals? Because they're very, very different, or fairness, or, what is play? Like what do all of those things mean in this context?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
When we say purpose, when we say values, when we say mission, when we say vision, what role does that word have to play? And just being agreed on that allows you to have a better conversation.
Next up, think outside your box, I think is the right way to say this. If I got that right, instead of the box, think outside your box.
I was just playing with that. I was playing with that myself, really, which is just to say, look, you need to think widely. You need to approach problems or ideas from many different perspectives. Go outside your box, your thinking, your silo, your discipline, your department. And so it allows you then to break free from the usual way you might think your way through something.
And it's often a good way to think about is the science and research tells us your first ideas are the same ones you generally have. because your brain goes to the easy spot first. So think, all right, I'm still going to ignore what comes up first. So it comes up to your stored solutions. Like if you're going, okay, I've got to get over to there. I'm going to walk and or I've got all the basic ways I'm going to do it. I need to make a bit of toast. All right, do it like this. So you want to go beyond what's in that easily stored information in your brain to the stuff in the back of your brain or your subconscious.
Yeah. It ties a little bit back to availability bias again, isn't it? What's your recent experiences? What's your store of knowledge that's easily accessible? And try to just break that pattern. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, the irony being that think outside the box is also one of those corporate sayings, but for the sake of our show, we'll let it slide. All right, John.
Yeah, I just created some new jargon. Think outside your box.
Yeah. Well, that's what I like. It.
to encapsulate that point. I mean, go again on that thing around problem. I know you do this in design thinking, of course, which is when you are solving things through design process, you think about, well, who's impacted by this particular problem, or who does this solution have to serve, and how are they impacted, and how might they want to use this solution? So it goes into those areas of sort of building an understanding of people's perspectives. It's cognitive empathy again, as well as maybe emotional empathy.
And even just asking, well, what are we actually trying to solve here? Because it's really easy to think, okay, immediate challenge, bang, solve from immediate space of mind. You dive deeper, you realize, no, that's not the challenge we even needs to be solved. That's the challenge we interpret in our head. So therefore your ideas will be completely different. So we would be number 7. Be vigilant, John. Vigilant like a superhero from Marvel or something, or looking out for a ninja. A ninja, yeah. Vigilant like a ninja.
It is, yes. It's being a superhero. I tell you what, it's about being super aware.
Yeah.
It's being super aware of your own biases, your own assumptions, your own blind spots, because you might be surprised to learn this, Simon, that we all have them. Even you and I have biases and assumptions. And
my assumption is I have no blind spots, John. So because I've gone outside
and
my
with
box.
The halo,
man. Yeah.
And with the halo effect, Simon, I believe you because you're a nice chap. So everything about you, I believe. There you go. That's a halo effect bias at play. No, so it's recognize that we've all got them, and all you can do is just be mindful of them, be vigilant, recognize, hey, is this a bias playing in here? Am I sort of shortcutting my thinking here and need to step back a bit from it? So it's that's all you can do is build your self-awareness, build your self-knowledge.
And a great example of this might be, I've worked at the company 35 years. Everyone looks at me or someone of my ilk for the answers. We ignore anyone who might have just come in as a grad, which I think is one of the great travesties of any organization, because they've come in with their own fresh, unique, cool, modern ways of working. So that might be a bias. Okay, our ideas come from here, or I look to this person, or nothing good ever came out of payroll, or whatever it may be. I think there's biases, assumptions, and sacred cows all over organizations as well.
Keep those biases about Kevin from accounts in check, basically, is what we're saying.
Yeah, good bloke, terrible ties.
He might have some really good ideas.
Yeah, but terrible ties, so you don't trust a man like that. Principle number 8, the philosophical train is rolling. Toot, toot. Ask who benefits.
Yes, ask who benefits. Always love a bit of Latin, and Julian doesn't disappoint. He puts in that as cui bono, which means who benefits. And it's a bit like where they have those in those detective and cops movies where they follow the money. Hey, follow the money. Yeah. That's where the villains are. They're at the end of the pile of cash, wherever that's being siphoned off to. So it's allowing you to recognize who's got vested interests, who may be benefiting from a said argument, idea, or solution, or whatever. Not in a bad way, but it's just then to say, well, if some people don't benefit from that, well, then how do we sort of bring them into the conversation? So recognizing an idea may come from a place where that person has a particular interest in an idea going through. Just check it. Just check to make sure it doesn't benefit someone to the detriment of another group of people within the organization, for example.
So it's a bit like a detective story, you would think, but maybe using spreadsheets and curiosity instead of fingerprints and DNA samples, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, less Columbo trench coats. But yes, you're right. It's corporate detectives. There you go. There's another podcast all straight there, isn't there? Corporate detectives.
Now, just as a side note, cui bono. Is that how you said it? You're Latin?
Cui bono.
Cui bono. In Australia, you very rarely hear someone sprouting Latin. So.
Well, that's it. Well, yeah, and you very rarely would hear unless you're working with lawyers or Boris Johnson.
Yeah. All right, number 9, John. We've come over the top of the philosophical roller coaster. We're heading down, starting to pick up speed. All right, number 9. Focus on what matters.
Yes, this is a big one, of course. This is about just focusing on what's important. Keep asking, is this, and this is a good question, is this really what we should be thinking about?
Yeah.
How often have you been in meetings and conversations get completely sidetracked into something that has relatively little importance, but everyone becomes very heated and involved and engrossed in something, and you have to pull them out of that rabbit hole?
Actually happens on our podcast most weeks, so we've got an active reference point. And is it along the lines of would you think? I
hadn't thought of that. Very good. Is this really what we should be thinking about?
Is it along the lines of also there might be someone who takes the conversation like right in a different direction? Do you often find that often, there's just literally not a gap, like they've got like circular breathing so they don't have to stop and pause, like a trumpet player, the old Louis Armstrong. And
then suddenly everybody chases it. It's a bit like, there's a brilliant video where you've got 3 professional football players, 3 international players, and they're playing 100 Korean school children. Have you seen this?
No.
And it's just, and so these 3 international adult players beat 100 Korean school children. So you kind of go, well,
I have seen this. Yeah, they're all running. As
you watch it, what happens is all the children just chase the ball wherever it goes. They chase that ball.
Yeah,
and that's a bit like, I think, when somebody throws a question in, they throw the football in, and everybody in the meeting follows that question without stopping to think, okay, what should we be thinking about? Or, hey, let's not chase that question. Actually, let's come back to what's important. Sometimes, of course, they might take you on a rabbit hole or sidetrack because they think there is a better question to be discussing, but at least you should recognize that that's what's happening. So there's a lovely phrase in Julian's book again, which is there is a double danger that we can be thinking well about the wrong things just as much as there is about thinking poorly about the right things.
Oh, Julian. Nice little quote in air quotes.
The gift that keeps on giving.
Absolutely. Number 10, I do like this, but I'm a little bit joyous, probably overjoyous in many ways, but I like this: assume positive intent.
Yes, particularly when you've got difficult colleagues, maybe. You have to assume they're coming from a good place, that their ideas, their arguments, etc., are coming from a good place, that they've got good intent. They're trying to get to the same place as you, which, in organizations often they are. They just might have a different way of expressing it or a different idea and how you might get there. But, they're intelligent, they're thinking about it, they want the best. So be charitable.
So Susan from HR sends another passive aggressive email. Put on the rose tinted glasses maybe and try and see it from her perspective, would one say? Yeah.
Absolutely. That's it. Yeah. Could be having a bad day. You don't know what's going on in people's lives. So we have to assume that positive intent. It gets you to such a different place if you go in with that assuming a positive intent.
And I think I've talked about this all the time. Listen with positive intent. So listen, we've mentioned this so many times on the show. Listen for what you're liking about, look for what you're liking about what's being said or what you're hearing or what the message is, and then you can follow it up with, here's the things we could, make it better. Because if you look for what's crap about an idea, as I've shared before. Hey, that's where your mindset goes. And you might be a little bit put off by HR Susan's passive-aggressive email, which was just meant as a joke. But you didn't understand the humour.
And just the last thing on that is there's some other things in Julian's sort of dissection of this as well, which is if you disagree with someone as well, so as well as assuming that positive intent, go in with an idea of trying to find out where that view or belief comes from. So don't just understand what they believe, but actually try to understand and get underneath why they believe that and how they believe, how they construct that. Because it allows you just to go beyond the positions that you might respectively hold to understanding maybe the values that are driving them.
Yeah.
And again, that allows you to build a much better understanding of someone. And with that being charitable, changes the dynamic, I think.
Yeah, I like it. And it's also around, let's say someone's also, you might say politically or a bunch of these different things, like their views seem so different to you and you think, nah. But I think if you can step back, and hard to do, and think, well, where does that view come from? What's driving that thinking might lead you to a bit of a better understanding. Now, John, number 11, stay humble.
Stay humble. Yes. This is close to my heart. This is because I've always thought that curiosity needs to be married with humility. So staying humble is being prepared to change your mind.
Yeah.
Recognizing you might be wrong.
Yeah.
They may be right. And that changing your mind is fine because your beliefs are not your identity. Because that's the thing often people get a little bit twitchy about, is that if someone's belief is challenged, they take that as a personal attack on their identity. So it's trying to pull that apart and just being a bit more mindful that you don't fall in love too much with your own ideas and are ready to admit you're wrong.
So gracefully accept as new information comes to light. Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, sure. My position's changed. And it's interesting. I always think, do you have in the UK, they call people in politics flip-floppers? Like, do you have that? Like, change? Yeah. I always think, I appreciate the intent of this probably, well, they're always changing their mind to please the electorate. But isn't it also a bit, well, hey, I've learnt more, so my position's changed? I think it's almost like a double-edged sword, that one. Like I think a little bit of be open to flip-flopping, if that's the right word, like a seal, as you need. Yeah, as new information comes to light.
Just the last thing on the humble and humility. Of course, there's humility in your own ideas coming forward. There's also just general humility in your own strength and what you're great at and how brilliant you are. And of course, one of the other dictates of philosophy that's often cited is know thyself. You know, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle all sort of said this and said, a good way to become more self-aware of your strength and potentially your blind spots is through the observations and feedback of others. So, feedback is another way to help you stay humble.
I'm thinking it's time to jump over to number 12, principle number 12. Think for yourself, not by yourself. I really like the sound of this. So about balancing your thought with collaboration of other people's thoughts and their diversity, and also being able to challenge your own thinking and other people's thinking. But I'm guessing using all that to still make your own decisions. Have I summarized that correctly, John?
Yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, you need solo reflection. That is essential, but you do need to engage with others, as we said, to get those different perspectives. You got to, as Montaigne says, rub brains together. We've said that a few times. If you think about Socratic dialogue, as would be associated with the great Socrates, it just means talking. It's just philosophical thought emerging through talking, engaging with others. So, it is about being a team player, but also an independent thinker. And that allows you, I think, to then ensure that the things like groupthink, some blind conformity, is less likely to emerge if you've had that opportunity for independent thinking. And then coming together to bring those thoughts together in a room.
So you're like a lone wolf, but you also hang out with a pack of like a hippo, a giraffe, like a koala, like a capybara and a jaguar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a psychometric tool that does that. Yeah, for you, so you can get the right wildlife mix in the room.
And an eagle as well. Yeah, a slug.
Yeah.
Anyway,
just the last thing as well, which I thought, which is if there's no one around, you could still engage in Socratic dialogue yourself by asking yourself, what would Kevin from accounts do?
Yeah,
which is your equivalent. So you try to get into the head of someone else and get a different perspective that way, if Kevin's not available, for example.
Okay, now this is a principle that Kevin loves as well. And we've spoken extensively on this before, and maybe not always in the most positive sense. Let's talk around one of our faves, VUCA.
I know, which does sound like a power smoothie.
Yeah.
Or something like that. There's definitely a bit of branding to be done. Yes, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, the reality of the modern workplace. I suppose I'm finishing with this because, everything's very messy and we have to find a way to sort of make our way through and navigate our way through. And I think philosophy's pretty much, that's what it's there for. It's philosophical thinking is about helping you navigate all of that uncertainty and tackle problems and getting comfortable in sitting in a problem. There's another one, which is living with a question. So question, obviously, you're trying to wrestle with a question. So really living with it, not trying to rush through with it, being comfortable to feel a bit uncomfortable for a while.
Yeah, and I think I shared this a few weeks ago. I'm positive I did, so apologies for saying the same thing, dear listenership. However, a girl I was working with, she said, look, you just got to love the problem. Like, sit in that and go, yeah, got to love it. We know it feels a bit shitty at the moment, as in because there's no easy, simple answer, but just love it. Yeah, love sitting in that space. And I thought it was such a nice little piece around sort of loving that problem and understanding, is messy. Like, is messy.
Yeah. This is messy.
Yeah.
We're going to bleep that, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think the people need to recognize, I think, as they come together as well, that as you go, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to always get greater clarity and you're trying to reduce uncertainty. I think the reality is you can probably get a lot greater clarity. You can reduce uncertainty, but I don't think you'll ever remove it completely. But as you go about that, as you go towards getting greater clarity around these discussions through this philosophical thought and conversation, it will highlight greater complexity sometimes. And of course, that might sort of initially create greater confusion around an issue. And that, again, can make teams feel uncomfortable. So it's about going, okay, this is what's going to happen. The process is going to take us through a dip. You'll often see that, don't you?
The valleys.
We see it. You see it in projects. You see it in all sorts of manner of corporate life, all sorts of different areas of corporate life. And in a conversation where you're trying to solve a problem or work your way through something, you're going to get a dip. But just prime people to expect it.
And when
don't worry, we've got the tools to get us out.
Yeah, and when you're there, go, hey, we're in a valley. That's cool. We know that good things will be on the other side. So, 13 principles to guide us on our journey to becoming occupational philosophers. Well done.
Yes. I know. I think that's the longest Inbetweener episode I think we've probably done in quite some time. And I must emphasize and conclude by saying heavily indebted to the work of Julian Baggini there. It's a great book, How to Think Like a Philosopher. I will put that as a reference in the show notes again. Yeah. And I hope that Julian is not offended by my interpretation around.
I'm sure he's listening.
The key points in this. Well, maybe we should get him back on so he can just correct me in a number of places. But no, that's what I took from it. And I just thought it was a wonderful source material to really get into the idea of, okay, well, how would you be an occupational philosopher?
Yeah. And what might that look like? So put on your philosophy hat this week. Think, when can I step back? When can I change my view? When can I be a little bit more curious? When can I make eye contact? There's a bunch of good things coming out of that. So we've reached the end of our episode. And if you enjoyed today's show, please tell your friends and really enjoy it when people get in contact. So all our contact details are on our website, which is occupationalphilosophers.com. Now, I make this thread often, but I'm feeling quite social, so we're going to start spruiking our social channels a little bit more in the not too distant future. But in the meantime, don't look for them. There's not much there. And as always, John, what do we say? What's a nice way to leave the show?
Well, when they're not sort of doom scrolling on social media, we want people to stay curious, play more, have fun, make stuff, and
when you leave the house, get out there and date life.